Hello, everyone. You ready to talk about brand marketing and top of funnel growth? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, specifically. Awesome. Well, we've got a phenomenal panel here today. I'm really, really excited. I'm going to let each of them intro themselves because I don't even think I could do any of you complete justice. So why don't we start in order?
Great. Hey, my name is Matt Early. I have been a part of the kind of Denver startup ecosystem for about 12 years. Was originally a part of building Drizzly, which is an alcohol delivery app, and launching that across the U.S. And then was at Havenly for 4 years in the online interior design space as a VP of growth. And then last couple of years, I've been building a company in the PTSD trauma treatment space. And I spent a lot of time just kind of working with and advising really early stage startups on growth strategies. So just, yeah, like Caroline. So, so just my experience is really all in how do we develop scalable strategy to find customers and convert them and retain them, and do so with, hopefully spending as little money as possible. Startups are about kind of survival, right? So it's all about how do you live to see another day and not spend all your cash and build something over time. So have been in the trenches at startups doing that, and so excited to share my thoughts and I guess the raw stories around how we might do that, and hopefully can be helpful in sparking some thoughts for you guys.
Hello, everybody. My name is Caroline. I am the founder of Wedfully. We are a live stream virtual wedding company. Yes, COVID born. Before COVID, we did virtual wedding planning. COVID hit, totally destroyed the wedding industry, so we pivoted rather quickly and saw a really fun, crazy past 2 years of growth. My background is not in marketing, but I've definitely had to learn everything about it and then some. My background is software engineering, so I'm happy to talk a little bit more about kind of the founder viewpoint of learning how to market your own company and really being scrappy about it. We are bootstrapped, so not a ton of cash to spend on marketing, which is always fun. And probably the lens that I can talk through or bring a lot of experience to is the PR / I was on Shark Tank, which is fun and flashy and exciting, and I have lots of fun stories about what that looks like. So I always joke, like, we've seen a lot of shot in the arm marketing efforts. Don't always recommend that if you don't have a stable growth system on the back end as well. But how many people in here are founders or early stage entrepreneurs? Cool, great, love that. We can definitely talk about all things marketing early on.
Hi everybody, my name is Chris Shoemake. I'm the Vice President of Comm Strategy and Media at a local ad agency called Cactus. We're a 70-person integrated agency. We do creative, brand strategy, media, digital development, web design, kind of everything you could expect from an agency partner. I grew up working in the paid media world, oversaw paid digital campaigns across a number of different clients and categories. And then more recently, I've played more of kind of a strategy role, thinking about how do we help bring a brand to market or a product to market for a brand, and then think about the kind of paid acquisition channels that support that go-to-market strategy. So definitely we'll talk a little bit about paid media today as kind of playing a role in building that top of funnel demand.
And hello, guys. My name's Mike Tavellini. I'm with Bark. We're a community of the dog obsessed. We're a 10-year-old business. Most people know us from our D2C subscription model, BarkBox. Since then, BarkBox is dog toys and treats delivered to your door monthly. Since then, we've expanded into other subscription-based models for Super Chewer, more durable toys and treats, expanded into dental, as well as food recently. We've also, through that time, expanded into most retail doors at this point. My background before coming to Bark was really it was on the agency side, working with clients in early stages that were disrupting their categories that they were in. Some of the early clients that I partnered with were Zipcar, Grubhub, Peloton, and Blue Buffalo, as through acquisition, through IPOs, really fun stuff. And I think I'm most eager to hear from Caroline today, because this is, I think, the most fun and innovative things that happen on the marketing side really happen when you have that shoestring budget, because you're constantly constrained and challenged to really break the mold.
Awesome. And then real quick, I'm Jake Cohen. I'll be your moderator. I'm also the Growth Track co-chair. So if you have any questions about growth, let me know afterwards. And yes, we stole founder stage for right now, so forgive us for the founder signs behind them, but we love them. And then I work at a company called Full Contact and run product marketing, and we focus a lot on how to improve relationships through the funnel. So this is a really exciting panel for me today. Speaking of that, would love to dive into how each of you look at a funnel. How would you kind of define it, and how do you approach thinking about it? I don't know if we have anyone that wants to start.
Since I've got the mic, I'll start. Our company, we spend greater than $50 million in paid advertising a year. So we've scaled up, obviously, significantly over that time. But, and I know the panel is about brand marketing, we look at our marketing. If I went into a meeting and said, hey, we're going to do some brand marketing, probably would get challenged right away, because the way that we approach our marketing efforts is pretty fiscally conservative, as well as we've got to always prove out the path to profitability in our marketing efforts. We do break out things, the funnel, as we'll say, or the consumer journey. There's different paid channels that help us accomplish different KPIs, but ultimately all of our marketing is tied to a new customer acquisition cost, and we think about that constantly.
I can just quickly talk. So, high level funnel, just to go really 101, typically you think top of funnel means really like introducing the brand, creating brand awareness, and starting to generate some demand at the top of the funnel. As you move through, you start thinking more about like engagement with that potential subscriber or that audience that you're speaking with. And then typically kind of the bottom of the funnel is, some conversion event, whether that means a purchase or a subscription or something like that. Someone, pulling out the credit card and actually making that purchase. And then, we always think about the funnel extends obviously beyond that to really think about advocacy and loyalty happening really at the bottom of the funnel. They're turning your customers into a media channel and into an acquisition channel to help grow the brand. I think, you just mentioned consumer journey and funnel. The funnel, in my perspective, is a pretty like outdated model when you really think about it. It's certainly not reality. Nobody actually moves through these distinct phases of awareness to consideration in this linear journey. It's really messy what happens in the middle there, right? We bounce in and out of consideration all the time, triggered by what's happening around us, or a need pops up. And so it's more of kind of an architecture, I think, and a scaffolding to build strategies around than it is reality. We spend a lot of time thinking about the consumer journey kind of first and foremost, and what's the way they sort of navigate their way to our brand and to that eventual purchase point. So that's a really high level breakdown.
Yeah, I think one of the ways I talk to like early startups about is almost thinking about it as a growth equation, right? So in a growth equation, you have it's like what does it take for your company to grow? So after the equal sign, what is that? I mean, usually it's like revenue, or it's, I don't know, monthly active users or whatever it might be. But then what are the components that it takes to build that? So you have traffic, you have sort of a conversion event, getting somebody through, getting them to purchase. You probably have retention. So can you get people to come back? Can you get them to continue to buy? But if you basically look at these different steps, then there's a lot of ways to compute like a successful equation there, right? You could increase a lot of traffic, but maybe you have really low conversion. You could have a really high conversion, and maybe you can have really low traffic, and that's okay. You could retain a ton of people and never need to go get more traffic. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So I think my advice in thinking about the funnel is think about what it means for your business to grow, because it's not always starting at the top of the funnel. You may say we really need to spend our time nurturing people, investing in people that are here, or maybe we don't need a lot of customers. Maybe 100 customers a month is a lot, or 100 customers a year is a lot. So I would encourage people to kind of view the funnel as that equation and figure out what that growth equation is for you, and then decide where you want to spend your time and focus. Because at early stage, maybe you get that first injection of a lot of people, like Wedfully did, and then it's not about, you can almost say like, I don't care that much about traffic right now. All I care about is nurture, converting, spending time with these people, getting them to actually like become a paying customer. And I'm just not going to spend time on paid marketing. I'm not going to spend time, SEO. Like maybe SEO is great, but like maybe at this point in my time as a founder, like I'm just not going to touch SEO, right? It doesn't mean I don't think SEO is good. It's just at this point in time, I don't care about it because I need to spend my time kind of developing those people. So I think thinking about that growth equation is an important place to start.
Yes, on the equation. So I used to have a funnel that I like drew out, and then I had an aha moment, probably with you and a couple other advisors, that an equation made more sense for us. So I'll like actually tell you what our equation is. So we look at 3 or 4 key metrics. One is website views, and I have this all in like a Airtable / spreadsheet that I like track daily, and it updates so that I really have an idea of like what these numbers are, and I can like daily I get a Slack message digesting it with like our conversion rates. So, and what we did, so we have website views, then we do a registration form, so that's like the next step in our equation, and then the next step after the registration form is we try to get them on a call. The final step is whether or not they actually show up to the call, and then whether or not they become a paid client. And so we like essentially have this on our, well, we're not in an office anymore, but we had it on our office whiteboard, and every like quarter I would look at it with my advisors and say, what number do I need to double click on and hyper focus on for this quarter? And so for us, we had so many people coming to our website just because we had these like huge marketing efforts, like not even, I mean, these great marketing things that happened like Shark Tank, right? Like that's so many people, but it wasn't necessarily our target demographic. And so my thought was like, how do we like double click into that and make sure that they're making their way into a call? And so each of those metrics, like we just had that equation written up on the board, and we decided like this quarter, we're only going to focus on getting people to show up to their call, because no shows are at 75%. And if we can lower that down to 50%, look at that. We have X amount of more paying clients. So I love the equation rather than a funnel.
Awesome. So whether with an equation, customer journey mapping, or a funnel, one critical piece, right, is the awareness component. So kind of curious how you all think about awareness. Obviously, Caroline, you took a really public awareness approach, and I think we've got some different ones throughout the board. I think we have a pretty good mix of awareness. So love to dive deeper into how you guys think about that. Let's have Caroline do it. She got last time.
Okay, so the one thing I want to say is there are no silver bullets in marketing, in my opinion. If there were, Shark Tank would be what people would consider a silver bullet. It still did amazing things for us. Obviously, I'm not complaining. 10 out of 10 would do it again. But I think I would also like to just like kind of speak a little bit to the cautionary tale of like going after these huge marketing moments. So just a quick background on 2020. We happened to be in the right place at the right time. Obviously, we've put in a ton of work, so it's not all luck, but I will say like we were the first people to jump on live streaming weddings, and I happen to be a very compelling person when people interview me in the press. So instead of it being like a quote in an article about how people are live streaming their weddings, I was able to like really take that interview and like make it about how the wedding industry is changing, and how COVID is like the silver lining of COVID is that these couples who never were welcomed by the industry to begin with, or never had the financial means to have a wedding, or maybe never even wanted to have a wedding in the first place, like this was opening up a whole new door for them. And so I really was able to take like these one-line interview requests and turn it into an entire piece about Wedfully and how we're changing the industry. And so we just saw like we were in the New York Times, we were in Vogue, we were in Brides Magazine, which is huge in the wedding world. I was on the Today Show. So we saw these like huge hits, obviously, and like we had analytics up when Shark Tank aired, and it was like bananas. And it's so fun, and obviously that's one way to approach marketing. And I think for early stage startups, like I literally was like, oh, if I can be in the New York Times, I will literally have made it in life. And then, another problem comes along. But all of that to say that I think that has a time and place, and like we definitely leaned into that. And I think PR is an amazing outlet, but I am excited to hear from all of them to hear how you can supplement that with like very targeted marketing effects, because we were throwing like a huge, what's that phrase? Like a huge net into into the ocean, right? Whereas like you could go fish at like a really small pond and get, every time you put your rod in, you're gonna get someone who needs your product, versus like not everyone that reads the New York Times or watches Shark Tank is getting married and wants an alternative wedding experience. That being said, like these are super fun efforts to supplement this like very targeted marketing work with. And I think it's really important, and I know we're going to talk about this in a little, to really focus on, if you are going to do these big efforts, that you really understand who your clientele is, because I was able to take those stories and really tailor them to a like narrative that really spoke to the people that we were going after, even if we were also hitting thousands of other people that maybe weren't in that target demographic. So I don't know if that...
Yeah, I'll add to that, which is, as much as important as it is to understand who your clientele is, it's really also important to understand who you are as a business and play into your strengths. So if you're streaming, storytelling, video probably makes a lot of sense, and you should be able to excel there, right? Bark being fun, energetic, all about the play side of dog. We do very well when we're talking about social media. We do very well in video formats. So that was an early part of our growth, was developing content series that were just fun things that only dog parents do. We had a whole series about basically things that your dog sees that nobody else sees that you do. Going to the bathroom, your dog's next to you, that type of thing. Where it's incredibly unique to our clients and our customers. The other thing is, where do you want to go as a business too? So there's an aspect from Bark where we want to be, community is incredibly important to us, and so we have a blog that's called Bark Post, where we actually provide a lot of educational aspects of dog parenting, right? So it's everything from what shops can I go to, what retail shops allow dogs in. That's common that people search for that. Also, kind of the health side of dog, of why do my dog's paws smell like Fritos? We also want to answer that question. And so we did early on a very big content push that played into our strengths and our expertise, so that when it came time to consider Bark and consider joining Bark Box, there was already a really warm, comfortable feel for those customers coming into our ecosystem, because we know it's important that you come into our community. And then as we've grown, the entry point is there, a single SKU in retail, the best experience on our D2C site.
Yeah, that's really good advice, that there's no template for acquisition. It's what position is your business in to be successful, that gives you the opportunity to acquire people in whatever way. So like an example, for some companies, paid media works really well, and for others it doesn't work well at all. The ones that works well for maybe have a really the utility makes sense the moment it's presented in an ad, right? So an example, when we were building Drizzly, we could put billboards up all around. We do these like heavy up campaigns where we drop 20 billboards into one market like Denver, and the only thing they said on them was alcohol delivered fast, right? Which is a kind of a sexy, compelling message that in that day when people weren't doing that type of delivery, that was interesting. So we would get eyeballs on those. But if you're trying to explain some really heavy message, you would never stick that on a billboard, right? So that maybe that works for Drizzly. Then there's other businesses that that are just in a position to do really well because they can present content in a compelling way, right? Like the way that Webfully presented not just live streaming weddings, but actually, we have an opinion on how the wedding industry is changing. Well, reporters really like that stuff. They don't want to just talk about a startup. They want to talk about some future interesting trend piece, right? The other thing I think that's important to note is. And this is not my concept. There's a really smart growth leader called Andrew Chen that you should follow if you're not already. And he talks about this idea of atomic networks. And what that means is basically distilling this, like the network of people that you're going after down to its most atomic form. So like the smallest format. And if you look at a lot of the best, fastest growing startups of the past 20 years, they all kind of started with these atomic networks. So example is like, when Facebook launched, they went campus by campus, right? So they became something interesting to every campus, and that helped that grow. Tinder started with these like parties that they would throw, and they'd make every person at that party download the app, and the next day, all these people in that small atomic network were talking about this thing. And so they would go network by network, and then eventually those networks become bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it's also thinking about what's your atomic network. I was working with a startup in the golf space, and their atomic network is go be meaningful to a group of golfers at a specific golf club and get them using their app or their software. Don't try to go target every golfer that's out there. Like, just start with these atomic networks, because what happens in those atomic networks is people know each other. They start talking. There's virality baked in. So I think it's smart to think about distilling everything down, because marketing and growth is hard, right? It's so hard. So let's try to make it a little more, let's try to simplify it, which is why I like to think about things like this growth equation, or the most distilled version of the audience you're going after, or the easiest way that we can acquire customers. Like, those are the best places to start when you're starting from the beginning. And so try not to overcomplicate what you're doing. Try to really distill it down to what makes the most sense.
Those are all amazing points. So the atomic network thing is such a great point. It's one, like when we're working with an early stage company or with a smaller budget company, that's often one of the first exercises we'll do is how do we go break, I call it like the 1-9-90 effect. It's like, who is the 1% that we can go reach that will talk to the 9%, that then if you can engage them the right way, they can carry your message out to the 90%, right? Instead of spending your paid media dollars targeting the 90% of the population that you're trying to get in front of, how do we go do something really meaningful to that 1% that can carry your message outward for you? And so I think that's a really smart way to think about how to leverage a kind of shoestring budget and try to maximize the impact there. And I think the Webfully is such a good example of, like, it's a cliche and it's Simon Sinek kind of thing, but like, people buy why you do something more than they buy just what you do. And that idea of like disrupting an industry and having that story as to why we're doing this is a really compelling message that can let that like 1 and that 9% carry that message out for you.
And to piggyback off of that, like the niche, finding a niche market, if you're pitching to an investor, they're going to be like, oh, but I want you to tell me how this is like the addressable market is blah, 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 blah. Okay, in marketing, like, it's actually really great if you can find that tiny little fishing hole and say like, oh, look, this is like my 1% or whatever that I'm going to dive so deep into. And then from there, you start to hopefully see that growth grow and like the industry starts to change. Like for us, if we had like pitched to a traditional VC and been like, oh yeah, like we have this really small addressable market of people who don't actually want a wedding, they would be like, oh, but what about everyone who wants a wedding? That's the way bigger market. And I'm like, well, great, you can think that because this is the growing market. Like, this is slowly the market that's getting bigger and bigger. And so like from a marketing standpoint, I think it's important to think about that versus like if you're pitching someone, I know you want their eyes to like pop out of their head when you say you have like millions of potential users, but like, yeah, if you're starting really small and you're on a small budget, having actually this super niche market that is like very easy to find is like a gold mine.
Yeah, I think along those lines, I think we get led probably to social, right? It's big behemoth in marketing, or it's not, depending on who you are. So kind of as we talk about creating communities and how to build that network, what are the different approaches to social that each of you have taken? Obviously, there's the paid, there's organic, and then there's not being on it at all, which are three very different approaches, and I know all work a little differently for different brands, but would love a deeper dive into that.
Yeah, I mean, with BarkBox, our social presence is incredibly important to us, and not just our branded handles, but also we've created other communities that we use to actually hear from very specific communities, corgis specifically. How do we learn from that audience? What kind of that's fueled a little bit of our product development and innovation. But also, new social channels out there, TikTok specifically, where everyone's saying, "Hey, that we got to be moving there. We got to moving there." We've been there for a couple years now, dabbling in, trying to figure out our approach, what's going to work. But as that happens, also the algorithms change too, and that changes the full direction that you go as well. But Bark specifically, to just mention what was said here, finding those like niche audiences is also where you're going to get really the true passionate feedback, either about your business or the category as a whole, which I think is really important as you think about future expansion and things like that. You want those people in your community feeling like they're part of it, feeling like they're influencing. People want to give that advice, and we'll let you know whether or not you ask it or not.
Yeah, there's I think social is the same where you want to, is like, do I need a presence, right? The answer is not always yes. And I think oftentimes those social can serve, like for Bark, I'm sure it serves as like truly an acquisition opportunity where people are going to see it. Some businesses, I think too, it can be more of a social proof, right? Where you just really want to, like, if you're kind of that fake it till you make it, like every startup is, then you need to act like you're bigger and more legitimate than you are. And so you start by creating a strong, not even a strong following, but like just make your presence feel larger there. But I think that social, you need to be careful to think that it needs to be like an extremely important, part of everything that you do. I had a really smart comment that I'm going to think about that I was leading to with all of that babble, and I'll come back to it after you speak.
So the advice that when I think about social media, I think it's a great point. It's not, it's not a key channel necessarily for every brand. The filter that I like to put on when we talk about social is like, how do we actually leverage the social component of social for the brands that we're partnering with? And really, social's become a very much like pay to play kind of space now for a lot of brands. I think the real value is in how can we create ideas and how can we sort of exploit moments in culture that align with our brand's purpose and that understanding of who our brand is that actually creates conversation amongst people. I think Bark, I'm sure, does an excellent job of doing that, of like tapping into the passion of these pet owners and letting them kind of carry that conversation for you. I think if you really know who your brand is well and that overlap with who your audience is, thinking about moments and opportunities to initiate and instigate conversation on social media can carry so much weight for you. If you can allow your audience to co-create kind of on your behalf, there's just massive gains to be had there. And it's not right for every brand, but I think it's a good filter to be thinking about.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is I think that, to me, the future of where social is going for a lot of people are actually some of these micro, like, community groups. It kind of goes along with the atomic network thing, but I think it's easy to get caught in the structure of thinking like my following or the amount of people that I have access to or the size of the network matters. But I would say that's probably one of the least important things. I think it's the engagement and where you can do that is actually like going and developing your own community around something, right? Like, I think people forget that a lot of acquisition is not just about converting people, it's about building that community. And don't forget that nurturing, I think, my opinion is that nurturing in that growth equation is the most important place. Maybe not if you're a direct consumer company selling like an electronic toothbrush and it's just this high utility thing. You don't need to maybe teach me that brushing my teeth is important. You just need to like position the right product, the right time with the right price. But I think for almost every other business, most businesses, like Wedfley is an example, you're probably not like learning about Wedfully like the perfect 6 months before you're planning your wedding, nor do you even think coming in that this is a good option or a good idea. Wedfully has to nurture you, right? And so if you can create community and nurture people as a part of that, that is where I think there's an inordinate amount of opportunity that most startups and companies are just leaving on the table because they're really good at bringing people in, and they're really good at maybe these conversion events, but everything that sits in between, they're just not spending the time or the effort on. And you can see it in teams, even at large companies, huge teams on acquisition, huge teams on sort of like low funnel conversion and retention, and very, very small teams. It's typically like an email person, right? They're like, oh, and then there's this email person that their job is to be responsible for kind of nurturing people. It's like that is such an important area that you don't want to screw up. And so my advice is like that nurture space between bringing somebody to your site and when they convert is so important because it's going to take so much time and effort. But if you really spend your time there, you'll have a lot of success.
I don't have much to say on social because we don't do much with social, but I tried to make it work for so long. And then I'm like sitting here thinking about it, and we have really wackadoodle couples, and they're not on Instagram. Like, they're not posting pretty pictures of their wedding because their wedding is like really wacky and like not what Instagram considers like a perfect, white baby breath flowers with like pink, it's so different than what social or Instagram or TikTok, like what that, or like a Pinterest wedding. Like, we are not doing Pinterest weddings. And I'm like proud of that and love that, and that's our clientele, but like social it's not a great channel for us. So as much as like we tried to make it work, like I think there's a reason it didn't work. That being said, I have a friend who runs a company, and they have like literally, they don't spend any money on paid social. It's all organic, and they have crushed it. And like that is their target demographic. Their clientele are the influencers of Instagram, and so like it makes sense to spend money there and spend time there. But for us, like, I don't know, like we have like 7,000 followers or something, which I think is great for the effort we put in. But like other companies have like hundreds of thousands our size, and it's like it's not that important like it is for like BarkBox. My dog is a little TikTok famous, so.
Yeah, and what's great though is you have to wake up every morning and figure out how you're going to spend your time, and it's in the. Even more important than what you're going to do is what you're not going to do. And so like be clear about, hey, like social doesn't really work for us, and it's not really our clients, like our clientele. So like I'm just not going to spend any time on it. Like maybe I'll spend an hour a week and like see what happens, but I'm going to spend my time on press because press is working, or this virality opportunity or this community thing. Like I think it's really important to like actually write down what am I not going to do? Because there's just too many things to try with marketing, and especially in an early stage, like you only have so many hours and so many dollars. Like just be very clear about, I'm not going to touch these 10 things, and I'm going to do these 2 or 3 over here.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I know I'm going to spend more of my time with corgis because apparently that's a source of innovation, and I'm going to commit to that because I need more innovation and corgis in my life. But I think that, a lot of this is getting into what do we do, what do we not do, and then what are we not allowed to do, which I think is something that we're seeing in top of funnel marketing, right? There are changes around iOS with app tracking transparency. There are changes around cookies, primarily in, I think, every browser at this point except for Chrome and soon coming to Chrome. And so that also leads into the social conversation. Obviously, Facebook's getting harder to target with. And I think a lot of that comes down to how are we thinking about data? How are we thinking about targeting in this age? Where are you leaning on, third-party tools in ways that you weren't before, that you now are, and vice versa? And then what about your first-party data? And I can break that down into additional questions later now that I'm realizing just how much I put in there. But if anyone has an immediate response.
Yeah, I mean, so definitely all of those things are happening. You know, we're seeing a dramatic impact actually of the Facebook changes across some of our clients. Some definitely hit harder than others, but certainly the targeting has gotten more difficult on the Facebook side, and that's continuing to happen across media channels too. The biggest advice that we talk to our clients about these days, and just sort of how to play some offense and some defense on that front, is really thinking about your own first-party data strategies, and just, you know, the first-party data capture, first-party data nurture, first-party data cleansing, making sure that you've got a really robust and sound kind of first-party data offering. So that can be anything from like your email capture and your CRM lists to thinking about other channels that you can tap into where you can leverage that first-party data. We're doing a lot with like SMS messaging and text, and kind of showing up directly on people's phones from leveraging that first party data. And so that's been the biggest advice really right now is you know, I think the industry has relied on third party data for so long, and there just are a lot of challenges that come along with that, and it's just gotten more challenging over the past couple of years. So really thinking about investing in a sound kind of first party data strategy, and I think doing that early from the beginnings of your business is going to be an important play as we move into the future with these privacy concerns.
Yeah, I think that Facebook being so efficient for so long and being such a good acquisition tool made a lot of marketers really lazy over time, because Facebook became so good at finding customers for us that we could basically just feed in these conversion events and then be like, Facebook's going to take care of it. And they did. They were pretty good at it. And it started to become more expensive, and I think that's another story as well. But I actually think what has happened is the lack of data and tracking now has caused, is putting marketers and growth people in a position where they have to be even more sophisticated and really think about what can we do to acquire and convert customers. And one of the things that I think is interesting is like, I love this idea of like, I don't want Facebook to be the best at finding people for me or converting people for me. I might pay them to get a lot of people to my site, but in some ways, I almost don't, this is going to sound stupid, but I almost don't care if I have all the perfect data to track that customer all the way through, because I didn't have it anyway. Like, they would come to our site and come back through all these sources, and then I'm trying to spend like literally hundreds of thousands of dollars just to know where they are and where they're coming from. So my thought on this topic is like, this gives it even a better reason to focus on the mid funnel, right? Like, get people to your site, maybe try to get them to, you know, do a sign up event, drop an email, and then from there, I think the actual like journey begins. Then it's like, how do I nurture them? How do I get them to come back a second time? How do I get them to interact with an email? How do I get them to come back and do some, like, maybe it's a Wedfully webinar, or, you know, view a video. Like, that's that first party stuff that I think matters, versus just being like, well, I'm going to try to acquire a lot of people and bring them here and then see what happens. Like, that's pretty lazy, you know? Like, let's like invest your time like managing and nurturing the people that come to your site. Also, like, a lot of those people that come through Facebook, like, they're just there looking and seeing if this is interesting to them. So like, I want to spend the time proving to them that this is interesting. Like, get them to the site and then like make your case, you know, like get them to come back. So I'm kind of in the camp that like, this is good for startups, this is good for growth, this is good for marketing, because it's causing us to have to be a little more sophisticated and strategic about how we acquire people, not just feeding some algorithm that's like going to, you know, give us customers.
The one thing I would add to that, I think it's an awesome point. I totally agree. I think one of the strategies truly at the top of the funnel, when it's about how do we go find those pools of people, that we're doing a lot of conversations around, is like thinking a little bit more contextually too. So I think we've really relied on like behavioral data, and that's been the third party data that you would get from a platform like Facebook. But you know, there's a lot of opportunity out there to think about sort of contextual moments and the right kind of content to be around and the right kind of contextual plays where we can probably go find these kind of audiences as well. You talked a lot about like showing up in the right groups and thinking about those sort of contextual moments as an opportunity also that can be supplemental to those like third party, like more behavioral based data, which I think has been the play for a long time as well.
I agree with everything you're saying. I would say, though, if you've got a channel that's working for you, that doesn't mean go away from it. If your core metrics are being hit, keep those going and add to it. because adding to it will hopefully, all ships will rise, and your media channels that will be, your core ones will become more efficient and things like that. But also, if there is an algorithm change, you want to have that muscle ready, and you to be able to scale up in those other paid channels or organic channels, and have that ability to be nimble and growth hacky as you kind of navigate the landscape.
Yeah, I think also all of us have had marketing budgets of some sort, and I think we all know they decrease sometimes. And then at that point, your first-party data and your organic growth is really where you need to double down. So make sure you have that muscle ready, because every marketing budget that's longer than 5 years long will decrease. So definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah, actually, I'll add a little bit more to this too, which is I think there was a panel yesterday that I spoke on about collaborations, and I think as you start to grow as an organization, if you're limited in paid funds or even just in general as you're growing, I think second-party data and partnering with other businesses that are like-minded or that complement your own offering is really important. And I call it like the shared brand equity that you bring to the table. Like, that elevates you and puts you into a whole new audience with a positive affinity of that other brand, and it enters your ecosystem, which is really nice. We've had a ton of success with partnerships, either equal businesses, larger businesses, smaller businesses that we feel passionate about.
That's awesome. Partner marketing is super cool. We don't have time for it, but do it. I think when it comes to partners, one type of partner that many marketers and organizations go to is an agency. We had a little prep call yesterday, and we were like, oh yes, we need to talk about this. This is so important. When to choose an agency and when to do things in-house. I think that's a question so many of us have. So would love everyone's thoughts on that.
I can start. I'm an agency guy, so choose an agency right away. No, I'm just kidding. I think there's different roles that an agency can play, obviously, and I think, if I'm thinking about an early stage founder, one of the things that I think an agency can be beneficial with is providing kind of outside perspective on your business and on you, like who you are as a business. So we talked earlier about really having a good understanding of who you are fundamentally, and using that when you're thinking about brand level marketing, right? Even if it's for a direct response cause, to be thinking about like who you are and how that comes through. And I think an agency partner can be an instrumental player in that early on in that process, to helping to really codify like who is this brand, and providing kind of outside perspective on that. I think when it comes to like the growth, like paid media or as a media partner, I think what's amazing in our industry now is like paid media and the access to paid media has really been democratized now, where these platforms are like self-service platforms these days, and it doesn't take, you don't have to be a science engineer to understand how to run these paid media campaigns. And so the idea of like doing early testing and not waiting for an agency partner to be doing experimentation and starting to play with your own media mix, and you can do these at a very low cost of entry kind of self-service manner, that I would highly recommend exploring that route and doing some learning for yourself before you engage an agency player to work as part of your media mix. And I'm saying that as an agency guy. I think as you continue to grow and develop, one of the main benefits is just you get that expertise, and then agencies, we buy a lot of tools. We subscribe to a lot of stuff, and so we can sort of share that with our clients and give a lot of audience insights and have access to data that maybe a founder wouldn't have on their own. And so there's a lot of value beyond just like the pulling of the levers from an agency perspective. But I would highly encourage the like experimentation phase to be happening at a very early stage of the business.
I'll piggyback off of that, and I think a lot of people want to take marketing off my plate, because maybe it wasn't my background and it's scary and it's really hard. But I want to like retweet that times 100, because I think it's really dangerous, and I did this. So take my cautionary tale to like think that you can just say like, oh great, like we'll just have an agency handle it, and that way I can focus on building product. And like what happened is just like I didn't understand in depth enough what was going on or like what needed to happen. So like it was equally my fault that it didn't work out because I didn't have the understanding of what worked for us yet. And like, they're going to experiment just like you're going to experiment. So you might as well experiment for free with your time than like go out and pay someone if you have a lower budget. So, and even if you have a huge budget, I still think it's so important to like get your feet wet with it and really understand like just what you're starting to kind of see work so that it can be more of a collaboration and less of like an outsourcing thing. And the other thing I would say on an agency thing from like a PR perspective, this is my opinion and my opinion only, but I think that if you want to go the PR route, you as the founder, that is your job. Like no one's going to pitch your company or share this angle as well as you are. I tried to hire a PR firm and like the stories that I was trying to get are my stories that I'm telling, and like I am the knowledge source. So if you want like a list of things like, oh, best Christmas presents to get your mom or whatever, PR agency is great. But like if you're trying to do these like, oh, the industry is changing and Wedfully is changing at pieces, like a PR agency is, they even told me, they were like, that's not something we can do. Our advice is like, that's your baby, that's your story, go do it. So I think agencies are great once you hit a certain stage and you're like, great, now I understand what's working and I want to like outsource it and work with them and collaborate. But like, I wouldn't encourage you to just be like, here's marketing of my company, have fun.
Yeah. I think it's be careful of agencies that say they do everything, because if you do everything, then I don't know what you're good at, right? Like even agencies that do like a lot of work, I don't think should say they do everything, right? It's like if you go to a restaurant and they have everything on the menu, like pizza and sushi, and you're like, this place probably sucks because they just like say they do it all. So just be careful about that. I like agencies that have like really try to focus in on something. It doesn't mean it's like just just paid marketing or just brand or whatever, but I think agencies that can truly articulate what they're really good at and also like what they don't do and what they're not good at. Like I don't want an agency to say, if I say anything, they say, yes, we can do that, right? Like you should say no as an agency to stuff that you're not good at. So make sure that that's happening. Own your brand when you're working with an agency. Like these guys were saying, you just, at the end of the day, the agency, it's not possible for them to care as much about what you're doing as you do, right? It's just not. They have to work on multiple projects. It's just a part of working. I worked at an agency too. I understand how it is, but be sure that you're being really prescriptive with what your expectation is from that agency, whether that's your metrics or sort of the direction that you're going. I think that is super important.
Again, agree with everything. I would say when you're considering like a consultant to help out instead of an agency, and even an agency, I mean, it's a relationship that you're building. And I think part of that is establishing those KPIs early of what success is, and it's mutual success. And it has to be cleared as to what the success is long term. If you're hiring a consultant that's doing a little part-time from an agency, off to the side, like if the goal is to ultimately bring on a growth person, have that conversation earlier and figure out like, hey, you want to grow with the organization, I just can't hire you quite yet. This is the path, and this is how we manage it. Tiered pricing, tiered services, I think are also like unlocking cost structures and things like that, I think are really important too.
I think it's a really good point about be wary of an agency that says they do everything. And I think working with an early stage company is a specific skill set of an agency, right? So this agency that works on Taco Bell and P&G every day may not have that same skill set that they need to apply to your business. And so finding someone with strong credentials and that like real proof points and a focus on helping to build a business at the stage that your business is in, I think is a really important filter and point to be thinking about.
Yeah, and starting with a contractor can just be a really great way to like just kick off or qualify that you even want to go spend maybe some of the bigger dollars with an agency. I think contractors are, there's just such a healthy contractor space right now within growth and marketing. And so I think finding somebody who can help you qualify whether or not that's a space you should invest in is really good. And Cactus is a great agency. I will say that because I have worked with them before. Yeah. So not to be the guy shitting on agencies, but there's a lot of bad ones out there. Cactus is a good one.
That's awesome. So I want to get to Q&A, but I do have one final question. I think I'd love kind of a final key piece of advice, and then how you choose to focus on things and how you choose to spend your time. I think those are two important ways to consider how we spend our time. So.
I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about how to spend your time. I'll leave that to these guys. But I think in today's kind of modern media landscape, there's so much complexity. There's so many various sort of distractions or things at your fingertips. I think just like discipline, but then also kind of an experimentation mindset is really important at an early stage business. Thinking about how do you be focused, but do it in a way that's going to create, learning as you kind of move through that process, and testing and kind of quickly failing. That's how we approach media. That's how I think, if you're thinking about how to drive that initial top of funnel demand, it's an important point to just keep trying.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think it is a pretty straightforward, are we better than we were yesterday type of attitude. And yesterday, last week, last month, last quarter, last year, don't get lapped by your previous run, and try to figure out, how are you constantly improving is critically important.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think I'm just like a really early stage startup person, and those are the companies I work with. So I think it's just figure out how you can go find that next person, that next customer. It's like, don't just really distill it down and try to simplify. It's too hard. It's just hard to be a founder. It's hard to be a head of growth. It's hard to be anything in marketing with startups. And so give yourself some patience, be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself. Know that it's hard for everybody. And when you wake up in the middle of the night with that cold sweat trying to figure out how you're going to scale, continue to grow this thing tomorrow so that you can raise money, keep your employees, pay yourself, stay alive. Just try to remind yourself that it's just about just continue to move forward. Find that next customer, find that next group of customers. Don't try to solve this huge challenge overnight, because that's not how you scale these businesses. And then just stay super focused. I think the advice that I was saying earlier about write a list down of what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. There's too many ideas. If you surround yourself with I saw a tweet that was for marketers' real job is listening to everybody's advice and then trying to tell them no to as many things as possible, because that's what it actually is. There's just too many ideas. So I think really just trying to stay focused, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, I love the idea of we're just not going to spend time on this, and that's okay. It's your business and you get to decide. And so it's totally fine to say no to things. And I think my biggest advice and what we've seen a ton of success with is just try wacky ideas. In marketing, I think it's all about how you can differentiate yourself, and don't necessarily follow a playbook just because it exists. The virtual weddings was literally an idea I had on a hike while we were shutting down the business, and I was oh, well, I could get a press hit off of that, and look where it took us. So I think always try wacky ideas, and I'm trying to think of some of our greatest wacky ideas, but get creative and just have fun. And the worst that's going to happen is nobody was here to begin with and nobody was there after. So great, you're still on the same playing field you were before. So it just can't hurt to try things and have fun with it. And I think that's where you get a lot of the creative social things, or a lot of these fun things that people are going to stop and look at and really take a beat to think about your company, which is the hardest thing to do when we're all fish brain. So yeah, just have fun and be weird, and who cares? I mean, literally you're starting out at a great place. So
it's just marketing. No one's going to die. But with that, who has some questions? Yeah.
First question is for Caroline. Congratulations.
Thanks.
How did you package that? Was that a cold email that you sent to them?
Great question. So what I did, and there's a really great article that I can share with people after that I followed, but I put together a list of contacts as well as their emails, phone numbers, whatever, And then I put together a press release and I just like sent it out. We were lucky that it like caught on with literally 3 of the biggest publications right away because the story was so relevant. And then from there, we had a ton of inbound. So we got lucky on that front. But I think if you do have inbound, really focusing on what the story you're going to tell when you get on that interview got us then, like, instead of, like I said, instead of just a mention in an article, it was like the headline of the article was us. So I do think like we set out to do, I think it was like, we've gotten lazy, but 2 press releases a month, and they were always wacky, right? It was never like, Wedfully does live streaming weddings. Like, it was always, like, most recently the press hit we got was we had a wedding where there were two people in hospice in different locations, and they got married virtually. And like, right, I mean, that's journalists were like, hell yeah, like we want to write about that. That's such a feel good story. So find these interesting angles. I used to pitch like CEO and founder of Wedfully launches in Denver. It's like nobody gives a flip about that. Like, do you know how many companies are launching every day? Because it's amazing and we all have access to like start companies, which is great, but like find an interesting angle. And then, yeah, put together just like I still have a spreadsheet of like hundreds of reporters that I'll just like email whenever I have a press release. What? Yeah. Oh.
So, hello. So, thank you to the panel. So, we were talking a little bit about the middle of the funnel. This can go to any one of you, but that nurture stage, Matt, that you were specifically mentioning on, are there any things that you see that are happening that are good, or examples that you can kind of point to? And then, kind of a second part to that is, how much is too much, right? Where you're blasting them, or you're seeming a little needy, where you don't get that conversion at the end.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, email matters, right? Like I as much as I want to, of all the things to invest your time in, I really do think like email programs really matter because it's like whether it's your welcome series or like when I think about nurture, I'm thinking about somebody showing me a small level of intent, but it's my job now to maybe teach them or show them why what I have for them is great, right? That might be like a pet subscription box where I'm saying, like not just showing people what's in it, but I'm actually like maybe educating them or teaching them about like why this is a better way to do something. At Havenly, for example, like people weren't looking for interior design. We could get someone to land on our site because it's interesting enough, online interior design, but we had to use nurture to actually show the need state and to give them a reason to want to take another step in. So I think email matters a lot. I think these like try before you buy, like how do I give someone some level of value ahead of needing to purchase something? So like Havenly, one of the things we did is we just created some really elegant spaces where people could explore other projects and could shop products that were in those. We also we tried at one point you could chat with a designer, because one thing we found out was a lot of people they don't think yet that doing an online design for a room is necessary. They need it or they want it. So, but maybe somebody just wants to ask a question like, hey, I've got a rug. I need a new rug. Like, what would work well in my space? Well, let's launch a product that allows them to chat with a designer. So I think there's some product work that you can do to think about when somebody lands on my site. That's just the first step. How do I then create a little bit more of a need state for them? So these like try before you buy, these like value creation things, using email for that. But in my opinion, it's also just like maintaining some sort of communicative, like just being top of mind for them. And so that could be text, it could be email, it could be leaving them alone and waiting for like really, really important things to talk to them about. I think good email is you send an email when there's a reason, when it really matters. You don't just do it to like you have a casual like relationship with somebody. Like, you got to learn what's the opportunity that I have, what's the right you have to talk to your consumers. So, but I'm big on outside of email, like how do you create something that can actually show them a little bit of a vision of what you're about to sell them, create that need state, and then over time, I think they'll decide this is something that I want to try or I want to use. Anybody else on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also being disciplined. It's like, how do you pay for some of this, right? And if everything is based on, getting the conversions that you're looking for, how can you do that ever so slightly more efficient within your existing budget to allow you to take some risk without any worry. So we do a lot of different testing and things like that where it's like, let's throw a little spaghetti at the wall. What's the worst thing that happens? It's already been baked into our formula of what we would consider success for the quarter. So we like de-risk a lot of our tests before we even start them, assuming that we get zero action out of that. And that's just a fun way to constantly challenge the team to, even if it's, a champion month, it's like, oh, we could have done this ever so slightly better to make next month easier for us.
Just one tiny comment on that too is like, if you are, I don't know how early stage or whatever, but if you are super early stage, like you have the time to interact with them actually like not automated. And so what we did is like figured out what worked when we were interacting with them and like on our own without an automation or without an email flow or a welcome series, and then took that once we were like not able to do that manually anymore and really looked at it and said, okay, well, what was working when we were interacting like person to person, and then automated that. And it kind of helped like how much, because you'll have a good gut. I mean, always push a little bit past your gut of being annoying, but like you'll have a good gut feeling of like, oh yeah, they interacted every blah, 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 or like, so I think it is important to like to have a welcome series, but then also try and do it yourself and then take that and automate it.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question. So come on, I have to pick between all of you. I think you raised your hand first.
So I have a little bit of a different model than most people. My target demographic is going to be over 40, probably more Gen X, baby boomer. My company, Original Archiving, helps people digitize their family photos and albums, slides. So I'm really selling their own legacy back to them and their own memories. And so Instagram, maybe, but definitely not TikTok, Twitter. Can you imagine your mom or grandma being on TikTok? It's not going to happen. So Facebook has been good, but what other recommendations would you have to reach that channel, that demographic?
I work with a client that maybe even a little bit older. They're kind of 65 plus is the sweet spot for this audience, and we do a lot of Facebook on that. We've actually seen like the kind of identity deprecation stuff that we've been talking about here has impacted that client probably the least. It's interesting that like we're still getting really great, Facebook number, better than we ever have. So we do quite a bit of that. We've done a lot of partnership work on that front to get in front of them through publications or things that maybe they're engaging with, other brands that they're engaging with. This is a kind of a healthcare client, so we'll partner up with another healthcare company or with someone like an AARP, for example, right? And we've done quite a bit of like actual deals with someone like an AARP to sort of show up in those people's mailboxes or in their front door. Direct mail is another thing that we've experimented with quite a bit for that demographic, and it's worked quite well. But it's interesting, like that audience is actually becoming increasingly digitally sophisticated is what we're seeing. So, we're definitely not, like we don't shy away from like QR coding and pushing them into a website and putting them through kind of a typical lead gen experience because we're seeing them adopt those kind of platforms. And, like digital banking, for instance, that's the most satisfied demographic with online banking now, which is amazing kind of post-COVID. So we're certainly seeing a lot more kind of digital adoption from that group, more than we had in the past.
Awesome. If you have additional questions, I'm sure our panelists can stick around for a little bit. Thank you so much for coming. Marketing is so important, and get those wacky ideas from your community. That's why you have a community here in Denver. So play off them and learn from each other. Thanks for coming.
Thank you guys very much. Yes. Yeah. I had a question for you.